Welcome to Yorkie Writes, bringing the lands Ellorian to life, a world of magic and majesty, of gods and mortals, of modern stories and timeless tales. Our first tale, Drive Them Back, is a story from the deep history of the lands Ellorian. It begins in a sacred forest, where the lives of two siblings, Viraja and Radek, are forever changed. What starts as a trial of faith will lead to choices that echo far beyond their tribe, sparking events that will shape the destiny of Ellorian itself. So make yourself comfortable as the morning mists embrace you. Welcome to Chapter 1, The Gathering Place.
Quiet, the dawn's still near. Her trial calls, the path is clear. Beneath the boughs, the goddess stays. Viraja waits at the gathering place. The drums will sound, the trial begins. This ritual binds her to her kin. Through silence deep, her role is sown. Her future claimed, her place her own.
Viraja raked her clawed fingers through the soft leaves beneath her, their chill damp penetrating her skin. She breathed in the sacred earthy tones of the goddess, the great huntress of the forest. This was the day she'd dreamed of her whole life, when her childhood ended, and she earned a place among the tribe's adults, or would die trying. It should have been a great day. Instead, something was unnerving her, something deep and foreboding. She could not say what it was, but it clung to her like the mist-soaked bearskin she wore. She looked towards the home tree, the giant oak Zorvin, from which the shaman would soon come to start the trial of Vyra, and offered a silent prayer to the goddess for guidance. Great huntress Vyra, I ask for your blessing on this, my day of proving. Send me a beast ferocious and powerful, whose venomous claw and fang might test me. I will face it with naught but your blessing, no weapon, no clothing, no companions. If I am worthy, show me the path you choose for me in this life and the next. If I am not, then I pledge my body to the forest to feed the beast you select. Around her, the sounds of the tribe waking stirred the air. Campfires were lit for the morning meal. Bearers brought water from the nearby stream. Elders and hunters planned the day ahead. Occasionally, the cry of someone controlling an unruly child rang loud. Yet none of them approached her. Before the trial, she had been a child, seen and loved, but without purpose. After, dependent on her vision, she would be a hunter, speaker, shaman, or one of the unmarked, serving the tribe's most basic needs. But until then, she was neither one nor the other. She did not exist. No one would see her until the shaman called her into being. She knelt alone in the gathering place and breathed deeply, trying to focus. The forest felt still. The earth steadied beneath her knees, but the tread in her chest refused to fade. It wasn't fear of death. She'd been taught to welcome that as part of the sacred cycle. It wasn't fear for her future either. Vyra would place her where she belonged. So why did it feel as though something was wrong? The more she struggled to understand it, the more worried she became. Her twin brother Radek should be here with her. His trial too was today. Yet it was only required that they be present by the time the trials began. She knew her brother. He was a good person, but a bit too playful when seriousness was needed. She pictured him laughing with friends or flirting with the young women of the tribe, stealing one last moment of joy before the trial. It brought her comfort to think of him that way, but it wasn't enough to banish the shadow clinging to her thoughts. Viraja turned back to prayer. Vyra, great huntress of the forest, guide my feet to your chosen path. Let me face the beast with honour and joy, and may my fate be your will. Still praying, sister? Wasn't all of last night enough? I think the goddess has heard you by now. Viraja opened her eyes and turned to see her brother enter the gathering place. Like her, he wore only the sacred fur of a forest bear, just enough to cover them from the elements before their trial began. He was taller than her by a hand and a half, and sturdier too, but he had never quite had her pace and agility. When they played together, she generally came out on top. Radek ran a hand through his hair. His tresses a darker shade of green than her own, and she noticed the feathers and bones tied there. What are you wearing, brother? She said. Just a bear fur like you. She shook her head in warning. Much as she loved her brother, this wasn't the time for his flippancy. He paused as his fingers fiddled with one of the charms. Oh, these? He said. Just a gift or two from Linira and Velia to wish me luck in the trial. You know you cannot wear them, said Viraja. We face the trial clad only in the blessings of the goddess until we return as adults, remember? Sister, I don't think the goddess wasted time counting every bead, bauble, and feather, Radek protested, sighing as he slowly began removing the charms. Besides, if you want to talk about blessings, Len and Vel have shown me plenty. Viraja shook her head, unsure whether she was pleased or annoyed by her brother's playfulness at such a sacred moment. In truth, it was usually a bit of both. And by all accounts, I already think you're a mighty hunter, brother. You may be of age, but perhaps you should wait before acting like that with too many women. She could understand why people would find her brother desirable. His bark mottled skin was a little darker than hers, and had some of the most beautiful patterning among the males of the tribe. His golden eyes shone like the sun, bright and sensual. When he returned, he would have no problem finding willing mates, even if he was unmarked by visions. This, however, was not the time. She scowled as she felt the wariness take her again. You should join me in prayer, brother. Today weighs our fate in the balance. Why so serious, sister? Asked Radek. She looked at him and frowned. Radek, it's our trial. Our life path is set today. He stepped forward and laid a hand on her shoulder comfortingly. We'll be fine, he said. We've trained for this. By the end of the day, we'll be celebrating with the tribe, sharing our visions and trophies. There's death in the air. Viraj didn't know where it had come from, but she'd finally said it. Radek paused, his humour deserting him for once. This wasn't the kind of thing he expected her to say. What do you mean? We're strong enough that we'll succeed in our trials, Viraja. No forest beast will defeat either of us, you know that. Certainly not you. Your very name means daughter of the goddess. Her thoughts raced, piecing together the strands. What do you hear, Radek? He paused. Just the tribe. Exactly, she said. The birds don't sing. The forest beasts don't speak. The leaves don't whisper with the breeze. It's like the very air itself is dead. His face softened with sympathy as he squeezed her shoulder. It's her, isn't it? I heard you praying about her last night. She glanced through the forest towards where the killing tree lay hidden. He was talking about their older sister. Viraja had been closer to her than Shivan was to her twin. Her trial had been 5 autumns ago, and the tribe had expected much of her. When she returned, however, she had lied about her vision, and been killed for betraying the goddess. No, Radek, she said. It's not that. I made my peace with what she did long ago, and only prayed for her forgiveness last night, that her soul might find peace. No. Something feels, there was only one word, wrong. A quiet rhythm drew their attention. The drummers had started the build-up to the ritual. It began with a steady beat from the stone drums of the unmarked. Soon the hunters joined, with their log drums covered by beaten hides. The Demotka, the tribal magic weaver, who crafted living plants into the tribe's homes, added the airy rhythm of his seed rattles. That only left the Yedver, the spiritual worker who enhanced the poisons used in hunts, whose bone flute brought the dance of life to the ritual. All around the edge of the gathering place, the tribe greeted the coming trials. Normally the shaman-to-be would add their voice to the rhythm, before voice of Zorovin, the shaman himself, came from his home to begin the rite. but no trialist had been granted a vision of the home tree since the old shaman died 12 winters ago. Radek shook his bare fur from his shoulders and reached down to take his sister's hand. "It's time," he said. "Let your fear fade, sister." Voice of Zodovin approaches. Viraja smiled at him. He was right. Whatever happened now had already started, and she could only rely on herself and her goddess to ensure that she succeeded. She let the fur fall from her as she stood beside her brother and turned toward the approaching shaman. Both now naked, there was nowhere left for anything but the truth. The power of the rhythm increased as the rest of the tribe gathered around them. Still, they would not see Radek and Viraja, mere spirits, while the goddess assessed them, until commanded to do so by the shaman. For the first time, Viraja felt a tremor in her brother's hand as he squeezed hers tightly. She glanced at him, surprised to see his golden eyes flicker with uncertainty. Radek, always so steady, so confident, was afraid. "It will be fine, Radek. I was worrying over nothing." She hoped she could believe that herself. Viraja felt her heart beating with the rhythm of the drums, excitement growing as she affirmed her faith in the goddess. The sound built, engulfing them like a solid wall of nature's power. Around the outside of the gathering place, the tribesmen chanted as the women danced, together bringing the power of the goddess's creatures to the ritual. The beasts Viraja and Radek would face lived in that moment, and they each offered thanks to Vyra for what was to come. Then it dropped. The drums quieted to a heartbeat, and Voice of Zorovin stepped from his home in the great tree. The dancing ended as the tribe stood in awe of the man approaching them, his slight stature belying the wisdom and power he wielded. They breathed as one, their spirits in time with his. The leaves of the home tree rustled, heralding the presence of the man who carried its will. Viraja bowed her head as she saw him. A memory came unbidden of her sister's failure. At first she'd thought the shaman had been the liar when he declared her vision false. But Viraja had been her child then. Now she knew she had been wrong. The shaman was truth. In the distance, Viraja heard a single bird sing, its voice light and fresh. She smiled as her fear lifted. The shaman raised his hands, spreading his arms like the branches of the home tree. "People of Zorovin, two spirits stand before you. You knew them in childhood as Radek and Viraja, the one boisterous and adventurous, the other dedicated and reverent. Soon they will rejoin us to take their place as adults of the tribe. You may feel you know their path. They may desire to join any one of our sacred groups. Yet our expectations and dreams mean nothing. It is only through the trial of Vyra that they will receive the vision that seals their future, whether shaman, speaker, hunter, or even unmarked. They will stride into the forest, each finding there a beast the goddess provides to test them, mighty and poisonous, a creature they must defeat armed only with their faith in Vyra's will. And we must trust in her will too, for history has shown that this is the way our people thrive. But we can give these spirits our blessing as they go. Bring forth the hunting paints. Let us decorate them in the image of the forest kin, that they may draw strength and guile for the trial ahead." The drumming began again, this time slow, a simple rhythm to mark the passing of time. 4 of the tribe stepped into the gathering place, each pair carrying a bubbling pot of liquid between them. Brushes made of split branches and leaves hung at their waists. They stepped in front of Viraja and Radek and set the pots on the ground before them. Slowly, they dipped the brushes into the liquid and raised them to the twins' faces, ready to begin applying the concoction. Viraja took a sharp breath to prepare herself. The hunting paints, a sacred mix of venom, thick sap, and vision-inducing mushrooms, would soon cling to her skin with a sting of spiritual magic. The pots had been heating in front of the Edwards hut all night, binding the elements together into the mix that would dress her entire body in the patterns of the goddess. Even her people's children had some resistance to poisons. So the brushes used were made of leaves and branches that had stings to scratch the flesh and allow the sacred paint to take effect. Her truest friends, Drazen and Milenka, had been selected to apply the paints to Viraja's face. To her side, she was unsurprised to see her brother's 2 paramours, Lenera and Velya, had been chosen as his painters. Voice of Zorovin always made sure the ones who would apply the hunting paint were those closest to the trialist, It made their suffering more bearable. Still, as her friends made the first marks across her forehead, and she felt the searing heat and the bite of the brushes, she only just suppressed a gasp. Beside her, Radek groaned. At first she thought it was pleasure, and rolled her eyes. But then she heard his breathing. He was worried. Next came the marks on her cheeks, down the sides of her nose, and across her chin. A trickle of blood stung as the brushes tore at the bump on her neck. For a moment she felt like crying out, but Drazen, who had passed his trial several seasons ago, held her gaze with his. Welcome it, he seemed to say. Be worthy. She bit her lip and made no sound. The brushes continued to dig at her as her friends painted the rest of her body. Arms, chest, abdomen and legs. Her more sensitive parts were not spared, and the seething poison seared her body and scourged her soul. From a dozen scratches and cuts, she felt the blood drip. She focused on the drumming to keep her steady, part of her wishing to call a halt to the trial, the rest of her knowing that was impossible. When she could, she used Drazen's gaze to give her strength. She had never imagined he could feel like this. Finally it was done. She stood gasping in shock as the world about her took a ghostly tinge. Her spirit felt closer to Vira's now. She was ready to begin the hunt. And so they are prepared, said Voice of Zorvin, as their friends finished painting them and stepped back. Like so many before them, the spirits of Viraja and Radek are ready to face their trial in Vira's deep forest. We cannot guess what the goddess has in store for them, but we can be sure that it will be the test they need to find their path. Perhaps they will face a great black snake, or a forest spider giant and menacing. Perhaps the slithering jeweler monster. Whatever it may be, let us send them off with the raucous motivation they deserve. Drum, my people, sing and dance. Let the energy flow through you and into them. At once the drums rose strong. The shakers and flute joined in. The tribesmen and women began to dance and holler, singing the beasts of the forest to life once more in a vibrant and chaotic cacophony. Viraja saw them before her, the great and dangerous predators, the small and vulnerable plant-eaters, the flying birds, the swimming fish. They were present in the sound and movement of her tribe, and her heart sang with joy. She took her brother's arms in hers. Their gazes met, and they found power in each other like never before. Throughout their childhood the twins had been together, never too far for them to call each other whenever they wanted. Now they had to face their greatest challenge alone. Viraja bent her brother's head forward towards her and planted a kiss of honour on his crown. He did the same to her, and with that they prayed together once more, not for themselves this time, but for each other. Leave now, spirit of the tribe to be, said Voice of Zorvin. Leave and fulfill your duty to the goddess, that you may return to us with the gift of destiny. The two twins nodded their thanks to the holy man, and turned to walk into the forest. Where once leather sandals had protected their feet, now the sting of twigs and thorns on bare flesh was a welcome pledge of their love of the goddess and dedication to her path. They reached the edge of the village together and faced each other once more. Strength, brother, said Viraja. You too, sister, said Radek. And they turned from each other, striding off to meet their own individual trials. This concludes the reading of The Gathering Place, Chapter 1 of Drive Them Back, A Tale of the Lands Ellorian. If you wish to see more, leave a like, comment and subscribe. Feedback is always welcome. This work remains copyright of Stephen Kemp, 2025. Next, hopefully within a few weeks to a month, will be Chapter 2, The Trial of Vira.